The experiment begins. The shuttle's hull vibrated as it pierced the thin veil of alien atmosphere. Commander Elara Voss sat rigid in her seat, eyes fixed on the shifting glow outside the viewport. 1,000 drills had prepared her for war, but none for this, a summons to the unknown, under the guise of cooperation. "They call it an exchange," muttered Lieutenant Harker from the seat beside her. "Scientists, diplomats, a few soldiers for protection. Feels more like livestock being herded to slaughter." Elara didn't reply. She shared the sentiment but kept her thoughts sealed tight. Her duty was to project strength, not fear. And yet, unease rippled beneath her composure. The Valerians had extended their invitation with flawless politeness, wrapped in words of mutual progress and scientific curiosity. Earth's leaders, dazzled by the promise of alien technology, had eagerly accepted. But Elara had seen the terms, read the fine print hidden beneath their language. Humans weren't partners here. They were subjects. The shuttle descended onto a landing platform that seemed to stretch forever, smooth metal, cold and flawless, glowing faintly with alien power. Beyond, towers rose like silver spires into a sky painted with 2 suns. Waiting for them was a delegation of Valerians, tall and willowy, their skin shimmering as though woven from starlight. One stepped forward, his elongated fingers clasped neatly, his expression unreadable. "Welcome, participants," he said, his voice carrying the strange harmony of multiple tones layered at once. "I am Archivist Xyrath. You stand at the threshold of knowledge. Together, we shall uncover the boundaries of your resilience." Elara's jaw tightened. Resilience. A clinical word for suffering. She watched as her group, scientists craning their necks in awe, diplomats fumbling for polite responses, soldiers scanning the perimeter, was ushered into the facility. Inside, the air was sharp with sterilized precision. Vast chambers stretched in every direction, filled with alien devices that hummed with restrained power. Observation decks overlooked cavernous arenas dotted with shifting landscapes, frozen wastelands, burning deserts, simulated urban ruins. It was a laboratory masquerading as a world. "This isn't research," Elara muttered under her breath. "It's a proving ground." Their quarters were Spartan but sufficient. The first trial came without warning. A siren blared, and the floor beneath them shifted, carrying the humans into one of the great arenas. The walls sealed with a metallic clang. A holographic projection shimmered into view, Xyrath's tall, calm form. "Your task is survival," his voice echoed. "Observe, adapt, endure. The experiment begins." The ground split open. From the fissures emerged creatures of steel and sinew, alien constructs built for pursuit. They moved with terrifying speed, claws sparking against the metallic floor. Panic erupted among the scientists and diplomats. Some froze, others screamed. Elara barked orders, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Form a line. Soldiers, shields up, protect the civilians. Move now." The first wave hit like a storm. Blades clashed against improvised defenses, screams filled the air, but Elara held the line. She drove her blade into the chest of one construct, sparks spraying as it collapsed. Another soldier went down, dragged screaming into the shadows. Minutes stretched into lifetimes, but when the last construct fell smoking to the ground, a silence heavier than steel filled the arena. The humans stood bloodied, bruised, but alive. Above, Xyrath's projection flickered back into view. His expression was unchanged, as if none of this carnage stirred him. "Noted," he said simply. "Endurance exceeds baseline projections." The hologram vanished. Elara wiped the blood from her cheek and looked around at the survivors. Faces pale, eyes wide, hands trembling, but alive. And alive meant capable of fighting again. She raised her voice, steady and fierce. "Listen to me. They think this is science. They think we're nothing but rats in a maze. But this," she gestured at the broken constructs, at the blood on their hands, "this isn't an experiment. This is a declaration. And if it's a battle they want, then by God, it's a battle they'll get." The humans straightened, the first flicker of defiance kindling in their eyes. For the first time since stepping foot on alien soil, they weren't victims. They were soldiers. And Commander Elara Voss had just declared humanity's war. The resistance forms. The chamber lights dimmed after the first trial, but the silence that followed was louder than any battle cry. Soldiers tended to their wounds, scientists huddled in quiet terror, and the diplomats sat pale-faced, their illusions of mutual progress shattered. Commander Elara Voss paced the narrow confines of their assigned quarters, her boots striking the floor like drumbeats. She could still hear Xyretha's words echoing in her skull. Endurance exceeds baseline projections. To the Valerians, their pain was a data point, their survival nothing more than a variable in an experiment. Not to her. "We're not rats," she said finally, loud enough for everyone to hear. The room stilled. Dozens of tired eyes turned to her. "We're soldiers, scientists, diplomats, human beings. And if we're going to get out of here, we need to start acting like one force. One people." Lieutenant Harker grunted from the corner, his arm bandaged and his rifle resting across his lap. "With what, Commander?" "We've got sidearms that barely scratch their toys, and they've got God's damned death machines." Elara stopped pacing. "Then we adapt. We do what humans have always done. We make something from nothing. That's how we've survived every war, every catastrophe in our history. We turn scraps into weapons. We turn weakness into strength." Her words rippled through the group. Some lifted their heads for the first time since the trial. Others exchanged uncertain looks, hope fighting with fear. Dr. Kiran Rao, a systems engineer with more brains than battlefield experience, raised a trembling hand. I may have something. When the constructs attacked, I noticed their movement patterns shifted whenever they passed near those pylons along the arena walls. Some kind of energy feedback. If we can tap into that, maybe we can disrupt them." Elara's lips curled into the faintest smile. "There's our first step. Good work, Doctor. We'll need a team to figure it out." From that night on, the survivors became more than subjects, they became a resistance. The next trial came at dawn. The humans were herded again into an arena, this time a simulated wasteland under a blistering twin sun. The air shimmered with heat, and distant shapes prowled the horizon. "Constructs again?" Harker muttered, squinting. "Different," Elara said. She could see it, these weren't drones. They moved with fluidity, like predators. Bioengineered beasts, flesh fused with alien metal. The creatures attacked in coordinated packs. Panic threatened to erupt again, but Elara barked orders, pulling the survivors into a defensive circle. This time, though, they weren't unprepared. Dr. Rao and his team had spent the night cobbling together crude devices using scraps from the quarters, wiring, circuits, even the casing of alien food dispensers. The result was a jury-rigged pulse emitter. When the first pack charged, Elara triggered the device. A shock wave of blue light rippled outward, and the beasts staggered, their metallic implants sparking. Soldiers seized the opening, pouring fire into the disoriented creatures. For the first time, the humans didn't just endure, they struck back. The arena floor was littered with alien carcasses when the trial ended. The survivors, bloodied but victorious, stood taller than they had before. Above, Xyretha's projection shimmered into view. His many-toned voice remained calm, but there was an edge of curiosity beneath it. "Unexpected. Adaptation exceeds probability models. The anomaly persists." Elara met his gaze, her voice steady as steel. "Call it what you want, Xyreth. We call it fighting back." That night, in the dim light of their quarters, Elara gathered the survivors once more. Their numbers were smaller, but their spirits burned brighter. "They wanted to see how far we could bend before we broke," she told them. "But they underestimated us. They always will. Because they don't understand what it means to be human." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Even the diplomats, once so timid, now clenched their fists with resolve. Lieutenant Harker leaned forward, eyes glinting. "So what's the plan, Commander?" Elara studied the faces around her, scientists, soldiers, civilians. Broken, bloodied, but unbowed. She felt a surge of pride swell in her chest. "We turn their experiment into our battlefield," she said. "We learn, we adapt, we strike. And when the time comes, we take the fight to them." The room erupted with quiet determination. No cheers, no bravado, just the raw, steady fire of survival turning into defiance. For the first time since their capture, Elara believed. Humanity wasn't just surviving. Humanity was resisting. And resistance was only the beginning. Escalation of war. The third trial was nothing like the others. The survivors were dragged into an arena that stretched for miles under a crimson sky. Shattered towers jutted from the ground, resembling the ruins of a city long dead. The air reeked of ozone and burnt metal. Commander Elara Voss scanned the horizon, her instincts prickling. The Valerians had grown impatient. This was no simple test of endurance, this was escalation. "Eyes up," she warned, her voice carrying over the comms. "They're done playing with us." Her prediction proved true when the ground trembled. From the ruins emerged machines the size of tanks, their armor gleaming like obsidian, their weapons humming with lethal energy. These weren't mindless constructs or beasts, they were soldiers. Valerian shock troopers, clad in living armor, each step shaking the earth. A murmur rippled through the humans. Fear, sharper than before. This time, their enemy wasn't something created for testing. This time, the Valerians themselves had entered the field. One of the soldiers opened fire, a lance of searing energy cutting a trench through the cracked ground. The humans scattered, diving for cover behind ruined walls. The cityscape was a graveyard of broken stone, and now it became their shield. "Hold positions!" Elara barked, slamming her back against a slab of debris. Dust rained down as another blast ripped past. "We've beaten their machines, we've beaten their beasts, we'll beat them too." But this was no easy fight. Human rifles barely scorched the Valerian armor. Every exchange felt like throwing stones at titans. Panic gnawed at the edges of discipline, and casualties mounted quickly. Dr. Rao's voice crackled over the comms, ragged with fear. "Commander, we can't keep this up. Their armor's impervious." "Nothing's impervious," Elara snapped. Her eyes flicked to the Valerian weapons, sleek rifles pulsing with alien energy. "If we can't break their armor with what we have, we'll take what they've got." "Cover me!" she shouted. Before anyone could argue, Elara sprinted from cover, weaving through fire. She dove, rolled, and slammed into a Valerian soldier's legs. The alien staggered, caught off guard by the sheer audacity of her charge. Elara drew her blade and jammed it into a joint where the armor plates overlapped. Sparks erupted. The soldier roared in its multi-toned voice and toppled. Elara wrenched the alien rifle from its grip and aimed. The weapon hummed in her hands, alive with unfamiliar energy. She squeezed the trigger, and a beam of raw power lanced out, vaporizing a second soldier where it stood. The battlefield froze for a heartbeat. Then the humans roared, surging forward with newfound fury. They swarmed the fallen alien, stripping armor, tearing weapons from its corpse. Crude, desperate, but effective. Within minutes, a ragged handful of humans were armed with Valerian rifles. And for the first time, the enemy bled. The fight raged for hours, a brutal dance of fire and blood. Humans learned quickly, adapting to alien weapons with terrifying speed. Where a day ago they had been subjects, now they were predators, turning their captors' tools against them. By the time the last Valerian fell, the arena was a graveyard of smoldering armor and broken walls. The humans, battered and bloodied, stood victorious amidst the wreckage. Above, as always, the hologram flickered into being. Archivist Zyratha's serene face looked down upon them. Yet this time, his calm seemed strained, as though cracks were beginning to show in his perfect composure. "Unprecedented," he murmured. "The variables have breached containment. The anomaly accelerates." Elara raised the stolen rifle and aimed it at his projection, her voice cold and fierce. "You call this an anomaly. I call it war." Zyratha's eyes narrowed. "War. You are outnumbered, outmatched. Your survival is statistically negligible." "Then your statistics are broken," Elara shot back. "Because we don't quit. Not now. Not ever." The hologram dissolved without another word, leaving only silence and the crackle of flames. That night, the survivors huddled together in the shadows of their quarters. Exhaustion hung over them, but so did something else, something brighter, sharper. "We killed them," Lieutenant Harker said quietly, almost in disbelief. "Not just their machines. Not their pets. Them." For the first time, we hurt them. Elara nodded, her gaze steady. And that means they can be beaten. Dr. Rao looked up from a salvaged alien rifle, his hands blackened with soot. Commander, if we can capture more of their tech, we can turn it against them. Shields, weapons, maybe even their comms. We could fight on equal ground. Elara's lips curved into a hard smile. Not equal ground, Doctor. Better ground. Because we're fighting for survival. They're fighting for data. That's the difference. The room fell into thoughtful silence. Each survivor felt the same fire ignite inside them. The Valerians had called this an experiment. But experiments end when the subject refuses to cooperate. Humanity wasn't cooperating anymore. They were declaring war. Declaration of battle. The facility shook with the rumble of alarms. Sirens wailed in tones no human ear was meant to hear, and crimson lights bathed the metallic corridors. For weeks, the Valerians had forced humanity into trial after trial, escalating the torment, escalating the stakes. But now, the humans weren't caged animals waiting to be tested. Now, they were hunters. Commander Elara Voss marched at the head of the column, a stolen Valerian rifle humming in her hands. Behind her, soldiers, scientists, and civilians moved with grim purpose, their makeshift armor clattering, their faces streaked with soot and blood. They were battered, half-starved, and outnumbered, but they were alive. And alive meant dangerous. "Core chambers dead ahead," Dr. Rao said, his voice shaking with both exhaustion and anticipation. He carried a crude device slung across his back, pieced together from salvaged alien tech. "If we overload the energy lattice, we can knock the whole facility offline." "Good," Elara said, her voice flat and sharp. "No more cages. No more experiments." The corridor opened into a cavernous chamber, the heart of the Valerian station. At its center towered a crystalline structure pulsing with raw energy, arcs of light crawling up its surface like veins of lightning. Observation platforms ringed the chamber, Valerian overseers watching with cold, calculating eyes. And standing before the core, tall and serene, was Archivist Xyrath. He raised a slender hand, silencing the chamber. His many-toned voice carried effortlessly. "Subjects, you have exceeded expectations. Your defiance is illuminating. But the experiment is at an end. Lay down your arms, and your survival will be preserved in the record." Elara stepped forward, rifle leveled at his chest. Her words cut like a blade. "We're not subjects. We're soldiers. And this experiment ends today, on our terms." A ripple of tension spread across the chamber. The Valerians shifted, their shimmering forms poised to strike. But Elara didn't wait. "Now!" she barked. The humans surged forward with a roar. Energy blasts lit the chamber, scorching the walls, shattering consoles. Stolen alien rifles thundered, crude explosives rattled the platforms. The Valerians fought back with elegant precision, their weapons slicing the air with lethal efficiency. The clash was chaos, discipline against desperation, science against survival. Elara cut through the fray, carving a path toward Xyrath. He stood unflinching, his calm expression unchanged even as his soldiers fell. With a flick of his wrist, a shimmering barrier snapped into place, deflecting her shots. "You fight with passion," he said, his voice almost admiring. "But passion burns out. Calculation endures." Elara slammed into the barrier, sparks flying. Her voice was a snarl. "You think we're just data points. You think everything can be measured, predicted. But you don't understand humanity at all." She slammed the alien rifle against the barrier, pouring fire until the weapon overheated and split apart in her hands. The barrier flickered, weakened. Elara seized the moment, driving her blade through the gap. The barrier shattered like glass. Xyrath staggered back, for the first time showing something almost human, surprise. "You would destroy knowledge itself?" he asked, his tones faltering. "No," Elara growled, pressing the blade to his chest. "I'll destroy your chains, and then we'll write our own future." With a thrust, she drove the blade home. Xyrath collapsed, his luminous form flickering, his voice fading into silence. Across the chamber, Dr. Rao triggered the overload device. The crystalline core screamed with energy, arcs of lightning ripping through the air. The walls shuddered, consoles exploded, and the entire facility trembled as if tearing itself apart. "Fall back!" Elara shouted, dragging survivors toward the hangar bays. They sprinted through fire and debris, past crumbling walls and dead Valerians. The station groaned like a wounded beast, its systems failing one by one. They burst into a hangar where captured transports sat idle. Humans scrambled aboard, powering up controls they had only half learned to use. Engines roared to life. One by one, the ships lifted off, streaking away from the collapsing station. From the viewport, Elara watched as the facility tore itself apart in a storm of fire and light. A sun was being born in miniature, consuming the place that had once been their prison. Silence filled the transport, heavy and awed. Then Lieutenant Harker spoke, his voice low, almost reverent. "We did it. We actually did it." Elara's gaze never left the explosion, her jaw set with grim resolve. "No," she said. "We've only begun. They'll come for us again. But next time, it won't be an experiment." She turned to her people, her soldiers, her survivors. Their faces were hollow with exhaustion, but their eyes burned with fire. "Next time," she said, "it will be war. And humanity will be ready." The stars stretched before them, vast and uncharted. And for the first time, humanity's voice echoed among them, not as a plea, not as a question, but as a declaration. A declaration of battle.